You and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. I'm David Hines, welcoming you all wherever you are joining us from, whether you're joining us from Guyana, the Caribbean, the wider Caribbean, or whether you're joining us from North America or Europe or in South America. Want to welcome you to Politics 101. I know the regulars are usually on time. Tonight we are going to be talking about recent developments in the petroleum industry. You know, we have to keep talking and keep in the spotlight the oil industry. And so we are going to, on a regular basis, bringing on the experts in that industry to talk us through what is happening. We know you've been hearing the word yellowtail, yellowtail a lot recently. The new kid in tongue, if you will, in the oil and gas industry. And of course, there has been quite a lot of talk about that new kid in tongue, whether in fact we have the necessary oversight, whether it was properly done, and all of that kind of stuff. The EPA has come under a lot of scrutiny as we talk about policing and oversighting the oil and gas industry. Well, the oil industry for now. We, of course, have learned on this program that we in Guyana, we have about 30, 40 years to take advantage of our oil and gas potential, our oil and gas resources, because of the trajectory that the world will move towards renewable energy in the coming decades. But we also have the challenge that as we exploit the oil and gas resources, we also have to be mindful of the risks, the potential risks. We've been hearing a lot about potential oil spill and what that could do for Guyana. We have been hearing a lot about fishermen, decreased catches, and what that would mean for us. I mean, we are a fish country in the sense that we consume a lot of fish. It would mean that prices of fish would go up. It will mean that we may have to import fish and all of that kind of stuff that is going on there in the industry. There have been a lot of calls for the government to release information about the yellowtail arrangement, and the government has not been forthcoming with information. I remember a few years ago when the coalition government signed, did the signing bonus. It's a big cry that it should make the agreement public. Some of us supported that call, that we did not feel that information that is available to people in the rest of the world should not be available to Guyanese. And the very people who were clamoring for the coalition to release information as it relates to agreements in the oil industry are now holding on to information as if it's their baby, as if it's their oil. So, the hypocrisy of politics, one of the things I usually ask my students, the old adage, if you study politics, they say politics is politics a necessary evil? Is it an unnecessary evil? Is it a necessary good? Is it an unnecessary good? And I usually ask my students to reflect on all of those or one of those. And I have to tell you, these are young people, their teens, early 20s. I have a hard time getting them to reflect on politics as a necessary good. They always, most of them, come to the early conclusion that politics is an unnecessary good. Some of them feel that politics is a necessary evil. It's very difficult to get them to think of politics as a necessary good. If you look at the way politicians behave, you quite understand why young people become alienated from politics. Okay, so you were saying the previous government did something wrong, and you hammer them, hounded them out of power, and you now come to office, come to power, and you're doing the same thing. And when they tell you you're wrong to do the same thing, you say, but you have no right to talk because all you used to do the same thing. What kind of nonsense is that? That is what passes for politics. As we've been saying on this program, we have a political culture in which politics, the politics of governance, is really the politics of revenge. That people spend their time, governments spend their time not governing, but seeking revenge on the previous government. They spend their time plotting how to win power the next time around. They spend their time trying to figure out how they can lock up the opposition. They spend their time, as we say, fooling the people. That's what governance is in Guyana, and by extension, the Caribbean. And opposition, by extension, means not cooperating in the interests of the nation, but means trying to undermine. You all know that term because I asked you all to do that, to undermine them. Opposition means undermining the government, because if the government is trying to lock you up, to jail you, to stifle you, then you respond to that. You can't cooperate with them. So opposition has come to mean undermining the government, plotting against the government. At the end of the day, the country suffers. That is what passes for politics. Anyhow, welcome to Politics 101. Welcome. Please, you all spread this link so that others can join our program. Please, 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 please. Want to welcome you all down. Welcome the regulars, welcome the new people. Tonight, like I said, we're going to be talking about the recent developments in the oil industry. So it's a very important discussion. But before we get to our panelists, just want to recognize the sad news as we come on tonight. We learn of the passing of one of the best known Guyanese legend. I'm talking about Henry Rodney, the dramatist, the actor, the cultural worker who passed away today. And you may be wondering why on a program like this, or why David Hines is talking about Henry Rodney. Well, first of all, Henry was my classmate. We went to school at Buxton Government Secondary School together. All of us took an early interest in literature and drama. In fact, I can safely say that I had a lot to do with Henry's beginnings in drama. We were at school, 1972 or 73, I think it was. one of the, if not the first film, Guyanese-made film, Agro Seasman. Some of us had auditioned and we got small parts. I was one of those. And we went back to school and we decided to form a drama group. And the first play we did was a play called Calabash Alley, which had been adopted in the 1970s as a popular radio serial. It was written by a dramatist from Trinidad named Mr. Kissoon. And that was the first play we did. And one of the characters was Papa George, a fresh old man. And I remember I was the director, 13, 14 years old. Oh, what do you know of directing? But anyhow, that was the big name, as the director of the play. And Papa George was this fresh old man. We had a fellow in the group named Nero. I forgot Nero's first name. But Nero looked like an old man at 13 years old. Henry sounded like an old man. And everybody wanted the part to go to Nero. Because Nero looked like an old man. He looked like a funny guy and so forth. And I think I took the decision on my own that I preferred Henry Rodney, who didn't look like an old man, but sounded much like an old man. And Henry played the part and never looked back. The next play we did was a play called Poke Knocker. Henry played the lead role of Sultan, the two Poke Knockers, Sultan and Tengar. And Henry played the role of Rose Chaplin saying, she remember Calabash Alley? Yeah, if you're an old timer, you remember Calabash Alley, you hurry him to get home. Because it used to come on, I think at 7 o'clock on the radio. You've done play, wash your foot, and go home early. Our parents used to glad in those days get home early to listen to Calabash Alley. And that was the first play. That was Henry's first big part. Henry was from BV, but he went to school in Buxton. He stayed by his cousins, the Hopes. And he would go home on weekends. So many people thought he was a Buxtonian. And that was the early beginnings of Henry Rodney. He never looked back. He was part of that group of us. We had two teachers, Waveney Seaford, who is now, I think, in Kenya, and Finella Abrams. They're both from Buxton. And they would have us turn short stories into skits. And that is what sparked our interest in drama. We owe it to them. Teacher Finella is there in Buxton still, and we meet up very often. And she will strangle me when she sees me the next time, because over the last couple of years, she has been telling me we should all go and see Henry. And we never got around to doing it. When I was home at Christmas, I wanted to go to see him. I met his brother on Christmas night at a Kwekwe, and Henry was quite a Kwekwe man. And I asked him where Henry was, and he said Henry had left 2 days before to come to the United States. So I never got to go to see him. Henry Rodney, I would say, one of the great Caribbean dramatists, Guyanese dramatists, sorry. And we have produced some high-class actors and actresses and dramatists. Henry, I would say, is way up there. Let us listen to a few minutes of Henry Rodney on stage.
Rokotoks. And we get it out of the beds that we buy, because most beds go like that. Rokotoks, 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 rokotoks. That is what we like. So y'all forget them old time shoppiness and get real. Now, I'm still on the men. Another thing, men, why a lot of y'all killing the blasted women? And then it looks as though by 2015, women will be extinct. But none of that, I'd rather kill you. Because I love them. Y'all leave, if I know, let me tell you, you see, why these men, the secret ladies, why these men are so irate and irritable and they get into a murderous zone when they realize that they are asleep. 6:30. When a man cannot rise to the occasion, he would murder you. We have a lot of dead men in this country. And I'm talking from up top to the bottom. Dead. Cannot rise to the occasion. Some men got to wait till Easter. You got to put on loop. Mountain loop. And you try to raise them and they get the lapping loop. They bow. They bow. A lot of men, they got to go with forker. You know forker, as little boys use a slingshot. You get the fork, and you put the two rubbers and the tongue and you... Yes. Forker for hold up. Can't rise to the occasion. Dead. So, men, to keep your relationship intact, stop the pretense. A lot of we do it. Fed up with this nonsense, man. Watch. The other night. Me wife tell me that it was hot she. Whenever she beat me, it was hot she more than it was hot me. Me wife tell me no. So, good Lord! Oh, he make the lady look shame. Oh my God. I'd like you. Okay. And like and like you're losing your voice. Okay. You could see you're accustomed to hollering. It's pressure. Too much pressure. Ah! 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 I tell you. Oh, yes. Oh, that's my big sister. She must know. All right. Bye. Eh? Put on your male voice. Hey, you could run for president next election. Why? You got all the necessary requirements. Yes, all right. Let me go back to human beings, right? Let me just go back to the human beings. I could come back to you just now. Let me deal with the human beings. Right.
Henry Rodney, gone too soon, you know, 63 years old, 63 years is young. But his life was well lived. We are going to next week do a full program on Henry Rodney. I'll try to gather a group of his colleagues to come on and we'll do a Politics 101 reminiscence on the life of Walter Rodney. You know, Henry Rodney. Politics and drama are very much linked. I didn't know whether Henry had a big interest in politics, but he certainly left his mark on Guyana. My generation who went to school in Buxton in those days, Henry Rodney has certainly been the most illustrious of us, the most popular and the most accomplished. We would often talk whenever we meet up about who has achieved the most. And we have always said Henry because he managed to get into our heads, get into our hearts, and he made life a little bit easier for us. Life could be hard in a place like Guyana, but thanks to people like Henry Rodney, they made the load a little bit lighter. Walk good, Henry. Walk good, my brother. Walk good. And next week, we're going to be talking in more depth, in depth, about the life and times of Henry Rodney. All right, now to the matter of hand, the matter at hand this evening, our oil and gas. Our oil, we keep saying gas, but the gas hasn't come yet. We're talking about oil. Barely a couple of years into the industry, and they promised that we were going to suffer from the Dutch disease. But I always say we have our own diseases in Guyana that oil will suffer from. And we are seeing that already. Let me bring my guest on tonight, Mr. David Patterson. I share a name with him, and is my partner. He's a little boy for me, but you know, he just play a big boy. You know, when I'm in Guyana, we usually meet up on Saturday afternoon where we talk politics when we are sober.
Very sober. Hi, good afternoon.
David, welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you very much for having me, David namesake. First thing I'll tell you is want to send condolences to Henry Rodney and his family. You know, I mean, friends and family. I saw several of his performances. I mean, I went to several of his Quequas. He was quite a character. You know, what I mean, you know, we sorely miss.
Yes. That's the other side of him, the Quequo side of him. People didn't know, but he helped to keep that tradition alive. David, welcome. It's a long time I haven't seen you. Let me tell you a couple of secrets about David. You know, they said that the APNU ministers were hard to find. You couldn't get them. So one day I saw David, and I said, well, David, boy, I come to your office. I've been trying to get you, and I can't get you. He said, why? I said, why is joke making? Because I can say David Patterson, so far as I know, was one of the ministers that at least me, I could get access to David Patterson. I didn't have to go through all the protocols and all that kind of stuff. He made himself available. Like I said, there was a place, and there is a place
Still there.
Saturday afternoon.
Still there. You have to also tell your viewers that you were buying the beers, and that was one of the incentives.
All right. And our next guest tonight is Young Low. I saw Elson Low. He's been on quite a bit. You know, I first saw Elson on Mark Denchop's show, I think about a year ago, and Mark warned this young man. He said, Dr. Hines is going to try to recruit you. Well, I couldn't recruit him to my party, the WPA, because he was already recruited. But I've recruited him to Politics 101. Elson, welcome again, my brother.
Good to be on. Good to be on. I have to say, if MP Patterson is a little boy to you, I don't know what I am. You know, yeah, that's a
Elson,
just a little smaller. Just a little smaller.
Yeah. When I was going to school, if you were 2 years younger, 3 years, you was a little boy. In those days, your magic age class you in. It's a big class for you, so it's a big boy for you. And it was not until I became much of an adult, I realized there were some guys who were younger than me. I was in bigger class than them. And I used to call them little boy. And when we left school, they said, no, you was a little boy. Welcome.
Well, yeah, that's true. And David, you could remember the days when you were a small boy, you used to wear short pants.
Yes.
Only when you got up to I mean, fourth form and so forth, you were allowed to put on long pants. So that's how we used to distinguish ourselves. Long
Yes.
pants and short pants.
There you go. There you go. There you go. David, let me open up with you. In yesterday's Kaichor news, in fact, in today's Kaichor news, one of the lead items, Exxon Mobil has free reign over Guyana. Those
Correct.
words are attributed to you. And I thought it was quite a wide-ranging statement. Explain what you meant or what you
Right,
mean.
David. It's no secret that this government, the PPP government, are bending over backwards for the oil operators. You know what I mean? And we could start at EPA, the environmental permits. You know that the most recent one is Yellowtail. They approved it in 3 days. It's over 1,000 pages. You know what I mean? I was reading it, trying to get through it as a shadow minister. You know what I mean? Over 1,000 pages is of document. EPA received the report and the board deliberated in 3 days.
Wow.
So, you know what I mean, obviously there's no sort of in-depth analysis done there. You know what I mean? Further in that permit, there are things such as people have to report to Exxon, report their complaints to Exxon, and Exxon has to go to and tell EPA what they've done about these reports, which is totally back to front. You know, I mean, normally you go to if you go to the police, you make a report to the police, and the police goes to the accused and those things like that. But that's how this government here has set up the Exxon to work. Things such as, I mean, you mentioned in your opening statement, things such as the diminished fish catching. Our fisher folks are catching less every time they go out. The responsibility is Exxon to go and find out why. That shouldn't be, because nobody's like putting a cat to watch the milk. So obviously, what we're doing is just allowing them to do whatever they want, all for the mighty dollar. You know what I mean? So they full coverage insurance still isn't there. I mean, every single safeguard that should be there, we've deferred it to Exxon. You know what I mean? We are what is supposed to be done. We're supposed to be independently monitoring each and every aspect of this operation, all the way from exploration to production, the downstream activities, the supply vessels, and those things like that. We are now saying, EPA is now saying in the last permit and in all the permits, Exxon, you monitor yourself. You tell us if the fault happens and what you're going to do to correct it, or what you did to correct it. So obviously we will get, you know what I mean, they don't say, you know, garbage in, garbage out. So that's exactly what's happening. So we have there's no independent auditing of what's going on. It's a free for all here in the oil industry. Free for all. The Exxon, in one of the permits, I know Dr. Vince Adams changes. It's back in again, whereby you have to give Exxon notice before you come in and inspect their the oil rigs in their operations. How can that be possible? How you mean you're supposed to be able, just like in any other area in Guyana, you know what I mean? The health authorities could come to your clinic and come to the food handlers could come to your stall, a little mom and pop stall, and examine your scales, examine how you're handling your food and those things like that. We, as Guyanese, invited Exxon in. They came, we give them permission, but we have to ask them, please, can I come and see what you're doing? And they said, oh, okay. And obviously they would say, well, you could come on, you can't come tomorrow, you could come next week. So obviously we just ceded all our independence to these oil operators. And I think that doesn't argue well for the future. What the PPP are after the dollar, and the dollar at any cost. But that's been the nature all the while. Huh? You can remember the Baishaling and those giveaways in the forestry division, you mean? You can remember the giveaways on the Omai and all of those things. So that's what the PPP are about. They want the money for their friends, their families, and their colleagues. Nothing for the rest of Guyana. They don't have any care whatsoever in how people plunder. I mean, that oh my goes spill. Nothing. They got to tap in the wrist. We can have the same thing here, but we're supposed to learn from our mistakes. We're not. We just simply and all they're saying is the best deal. And remember, you in your introduction, you talked how they chastise the AP and UAFC administration on the oil contract, on the signing bonus, and everything like that. And how they got up and said a better deal could be had and those things like that. They're not interested in that. They're all interested in is getting whatever little money they can get. Screw the rest of the country. If anything happens, they're most likely their PR will say, oh, well, it's a deal that the AP and UAFC signed and they had nothing to do with it. But all the blame, every single set of the blame that was happening now is directly on the PPP.
Elson, you're the economist here. If you accept the thesis, David's thesis about the state of play in the oil sector, put that in large economic perspective. What does it mean for the Guyanese economy now, in the near term, and in the long term?
Yes, absolutely. I think there are a couple of key points. One, the MP Patterson kind of brushed on, which is this question of audits and of the financial side of things. I think that's one thing. I think the other is the environmental questions, such as regarding an oil spill and the economic consequences of something like that. I think those are important ones. And I think also there's a question as to the size of production and how quickly Exxon is going to go into that, which is not an issue to consider. But I would say that the first thing that continues to be concerning is this area regarding a potential oil spill and whether we are appropriately covered. We've received assurances from the company that they'll deal with any such event, but assurances I think Guyanese would certainly say are not enough. And given that we anticipate production over a 20, 25, 30-year period, we would have to be very lucky for there never to be any incidents. I would put it that way. We'd have to be very lucky. So that I think is something that we will continue to have discussions with the company about to ensure that is something that is covered. The other thing that I think is very important and often not understood, the magnitude of the importance of this issue, is the auditing of these costs, of Exxon's costs. We're seeing that I believe the Payara development, which is $9 billion US in costs, that auditing period will soon be up, and we haven't put in place enough measures, and we haven't, I believe, started any kind of audit. Again, there's this cry that there isn't local expertise and so on, but I think that given the outcry regarding them, the PPP not auditing the previous costs, you would think that there'd be a much more robust effort, that there'd be a very aggressive effort to ensure that these costs are now going to be audited. Now, we say, oh, we have to audit the Exxon costs. And I think Guyanese think to themselves, well, what does that mean? Is that important? There are studies which indicate that if it were not for improper practices by companies reclaiming costs and so on, in the African continent, that the entirety of the continent would more or less be developed at this point, because the amount of money involved is so much. And I think Guyanese need to seriously continue to press the administration to audit, to get these things done, and to review these projects. What we've also heard is that the timeline that is expired for the LISA 1 and 2 audits, that we're going to get, that Exxon is going to allow us to audit those books, and we're going to get something out of that. I'm waiting to see what comes out of that. I'm not particularly optimistic about that. I think that if you're going to be asking Exxon to put up its books after your time period, your legal time period has passed, I don't know the degree of cooperation. I don't know how eager they will be to involve themselves in that, because they have no legal really requirement that they involve themselves in that. That's just them being charitable. So let's see how that goes. But as I mentioned, I'm not optimistic, even as much as I'm sure they will follow the law as best they can. Now, we do have another audit of $9 billion for Payara. What is important about that is that we don't know whether or not Exxon has been inflating costs. We don't know whether or not there are things going on that should not be going on, and whether Guyanese are paying far too much and really should be paying far less. However, an audit is the only way that we can find that out. And indeed, the IDB, when I was at SARA, provided me with training regarding things to look out for, such as transfer pricing, setting up shell companies and running your costs through them, inflating your costs, and so on, which would be picked up by a proper audit, or could be picked up by a proper audit, to save the country substantial amounts of money. We don't know whether Exxon or any other company is involved in these practices, but that's the purpose of an audit, is to find out, and is to safeguard the interests of the people. This is 9 billion US that we're talking about. We're not talking about 9 billion Guyana dollars. We're talking about 9 billion US. Guyana's budget is only 2.5 billion US. So this is several times the national budget of Guyana we're talking about in costs. We have to take these things seriously. I believe that as a country we have to do that. I personally think that it should be a criminal offense for audits to be allowed to lapse. However, I think that enough pressure is not being put on the government in that regard, and Guyanese need to keep this in mind and to call for these types of things, because the downside of this is that the benefits from the oil and gas industry will be much reduced if we're paying far too high prices for these developments. And Exxon is moving ahead with developments. You see Yellowtail coming forward. That's another massive development. I believe that's the biggest in terms of cost at 10 billion. This, it's going to be difficult for us to have the type of future that we're looking towards if we don't properly audit Exxon. And if Exxon, of course, has observed that we have not audited previous developments, that's not going to be something that they're not aware of. So we have to ensure that we at all times fulfill our own obligation, which is to be vigilant about these costs. Of course, we don't know, but audits are how you find out. So that's something that I think is extremely concerning. The scale of the problem in terms of the amount of money involved is extremely concerning, and that can have a big impact on Guyana's development future, because it will impact how much revenue the government can even get out of these developments.
And so therefore it would have at least an indirect effect on the ordinary Guyanese, because as we talk about these issues, I always want us to think about ordinary people, poor people, the ordinary people who are on this program, for us to tell them how this is going to impact them. And what you were saying, the anticipated revenue will be seriously diminished. And for people on this program who are supporters of the opposition, who are already victims of unequal distribution, you will have unequal distribution of a reduced amount of revenue once the PPP continues with this nonsense that is happening here. Let me bring in David. David, you talked about the Yellowtail development, which is the new development. How many pages you said it is?
3 days. 3 days. 1,000 pages. We went through them in 3 days. It was just a smoke screen. So the process was that that Exxon applies to the EPA for an environmental permit, and what they're supposed to do, they're supposed to have public consultations, get complaints and objections from the public, which there were a lot. Even persons from the Caribbean complained about the possibility of a leak of oil seeping onto their beaches. And of course, they're tourism based. People in Barbados, Trinidad, and the small islands. Well, not small islands, but the Leeward Islands. They complained. Their agencies complained. After getting back all of these reports, what Exxon was supposed to do is do a full report on taking all the complaints and all the recommendations and all the challenges raised by other persons, and then provide a comprehensive report saying this is what we will do, this is what we can do, these are the possible risks or not. That report, in any other country and particularly in the United States, in any other development, when they submit back that report to EPA, that's just a draft. The EPA is supposed to disseminate that to everybody that made a complaint and to the public to say, this, Exxon has listened to you. They had public consultations, and this is what they said, or this is what they have come up with. That was never done. The 1,000-page document went into EPA 3 days after. They said, "Oh, they're satisfied with it." They probably didn't read the cover, and they've approved the biggest, as Elson said, the biggest ever single project in the history of Guyana, $10 billion. Early last year, they approved the Payara, which is another $9.5 billion. Of course, there's Lisa 1 and Lisa 2, which is for $6 billion. So they've allowed that's what I'm saying. So they've allowed Exxon almost $20 billion in investment with very little scrutiny.
Very little
scrutiny. And Elson was raising a point about audits. What he didn't explain, what he should have said to your viewers is why an audit? Because the contract is what is called cost recovery, in the sense that Exxon are entitled to recover monies legitimately spent on a project. So therefore, it's like if you're building a house, David, the money, and you're the contractor, the client pays you back for the work, material, and labor that you put into the project. So Exxon has said to us, said to the Guyana, that we spent $9.5 billion so far. Someone is supposed to go through their books and ensure how this $9.5 billion was actually spent on Guyanese projects. Because what happens is that, like if they have a Christmas party, which is nothing related to the oil development. They have a Christmas party, they fly in, all their executives are Learjet. They stay in Marriott, they drink champagne, and it comes up to $1 million. They can, if we don't audit it, they will put $1 million for that party in your bill and say, well, yes, well, you have to pay me for this $1 million. And then wow. Elson will say it, and they set up shell companies. And a shell company is you register David Hines Associates in the Bahamas, and David Hines Associates bills every single month Exxon $5 million, and they pay him, but David Hines Associates did nothing. But when the auditors come in, they will say to her, well, you're paying David Hines Associates, what are you paying for? Let's see what he's done. And then they say, no, that's not a valid bill, it's fraudulent, it's misleading, and they knock it out. So what happens is the cost that they declared, the $9.5 billion, conservative estimates are that you can actually save about $1 billion or 10%, $900 million US dollars. You can knock it off for the price that they're reporting. And that's why it's important with $900 million, you can pay every single public servant $200,000 minimum wage. And that's nothing you could pay all. You could raise your minimum wage from $17,000. It is now to $200,000 per month with the money you save when you go through that audit. So that is why it is very, very important for us to do those things. Also, there's been a call, and I know that the WPA is the champion, is for cash transfers. The government keeps saying that they can't afford it because X, Y, and Z. But if you conduct a very valid, true, thorough audit, the money that you garner from that audit, the savings that you can get, that can fund, at least partially fund, some sort of limited cash transfer to the poor and the vulnerable and the youth and those things like that. Free education at university. So all of these things that they've been talking about, but they claim they can't afford, they can if they do the work correctly.
David, and I'm putting this question to both you and Elson. There's a government that talks about saving democracy, talks about one Guyana, and talks about patriotism and commitment to all these high ideals. How the dickens can a government not do the due diligence to get money for this democracy that they save? Explain to our audience what's going on here.
One Guyana is like a election slogan, you know what I mean? Like, you know, that somebody, Trump would say, you know what I mean, drain the swamp, and everybody caught on to it, you know what I mean? So it's just in the slogan that they have. It really has no meat, no merit. And they speak about democracy and those things. Democracy is inclusion. Democracy is one man, one vote, one man, one voice. But that's not happening here. The opposition has been shut out to every single thing. And I'll give you an example, because we're speaking about oil and gas.
Yeah.
When Exxon first discovered oil in May of 2015, and after, between 2015 and 2020, it was the APNU's, AFC's policy that Exxon would, what they would do, they would come in and they would give us an update. They come and say, we've done this, and so forth. And after giving the government the update, they were mandated to go and give the opposition an update, because the oil is not the PPP oil, it's not the AFC, APNU, it's the people of Guyana's oil. And we recognize that at that time they were 49%, and they must know what's going on. So therefore, so the Exxon would come, and the high officials and would come and brief the government, and brief cabinet. The next day or the day after, however they schedule it, they will go and brief PPP, particularly Barrett, and use that annual sometimes. I don't know if Irfan made the cut at those days. And they would go and they brief them. That isn't happening now. So everything that we read and we discuss here on these shows and in the public are what we public releases. They tell you what they want the public to know, unless you force their hands. And I give you a perfect example of that. In 2018, Exxon said that until PR up to Lisa Well, they had spent 460 million Guyana dollars from when they started 1999 to Lisa 1, before they actually started oil production, which is all the surveys and those things like that. We, the APNU AFC, hired a firm out of England, an auditing firm out of England, along with GRA, to audit that $460 million. And that's about 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. In 2020, September 2020, the Commissioner General of GRA, Mr. Godfrey Station, publicly got up and said and told everywhere, the whole country, that the audit has been finished. The consultants have done their work, GRA has reviewed it, and we have submitted it to the government. Come 2022, the government are saying it's not been finished. So therefore, the consultants that we have paid are lying. The Commissioner General of GRA, and these are public statements, have to be lying, but they're saying that it hasn't been completed. And they haven't completed the very first one, which was paid for, submitted, and everything like that. And that is why I made the statement that, they have free rein, Exxon has free rein. And that would have given you a clear indication, because of course, of their billing practices and those things like that. So, we're not in a good place. We're not in a good place with this industry, because I'll talk later on other matters. But when it comes to the stewardship of the oil and gas, of the revenues and the finances, we're not in a good place. We're making a lot of money. The Natural Resource Fund at the end of at the beginning of 2022 at $640 million US. They took out 95% of it. but we're not in a good place. Later on, I'll go into the National Reforce Fund Act and what they did versus what we did, because as you know, there's a court case on that at the moment.
Yes. Elson, how can people be talking about saving democracy yet giving away the country's money in front of the public and not being fearful of being sanctioned? What's going on?
Yeah, well, just as the MP is mentioning natural resources fund, that's something that I think we have to speak about in the context of democracy, because that's there was not the appropriate consultation.
Right.
A lot of people who should have been consulted, because I did a lot of advocacy trying to get them to stop this bill from being passed, expressed surprise. They expressed surprise that the bill was being passed as to the contents of the bill. And I don't know how consultations could have happened, satisfactory consultations, if the people that you're supposed to be consulting with are expressing surprise. In fact, many youth organizations were totally unaware of what was going on. And, I was the one who actually made them aware that X, Y, and Z is something that was going on. Even there's a wide range of organizations and interests that were removed from that particular act, again without some sort of satisfactory consultation. Now, our constitution, this is something that has been that a lot of people have brought up lately, including civil society group Article 13. Our constitution calls for consultation. It calls for inclusive governance. This is a key part of what it means to be democratic in Guyana. And as you would, of course, know, Dr. Hines, you would, of course, know that the true test of a democracy is the strength of the protections for minorities. That's one of the things that gives you a sense of the quality of a democracy. So, not having consultations with small groups who have an interest in what is going on is an indication that the quality of the democracy that you have is very poor. And so I think that is what we're seeing very much play out when it comes to that act. Of course, the MP and I will talk in great detail about some of the things within the act itself that are very, very troubling. Of course, as he mentioned, there's a court case that is going to address that very act. But just even before the act itself was passed, the circumstances around it were hugely concerning. Lack of consultation, the speed with which they looked to pass this act, only providing a few days for people to even review the act. You even had organizations, and these are not particularly pro coalition organizations, but various business organizations. I believe it was the GCCI that came out to say that there should be a pause so that there could be a review, so that the act could be looked at before it was passed. None of this happened. It was rammed through Parliament. We know the details of that, which a very controversial session of Parliament. And as a result, we've now got a Natural Resources Fund Act, which I have called an abomination and a monstrosity. So that has really set us up for this period of poor governance, which I think, of course, some of it preceded this, but I think this has set us up for a period of very poor governance, and we've seen that reflected in actions since that sad date, where I think really many of the tenets of democracy were stomped on by the government, and even something in some of the elements of the act themselves remain very, very much in question, such as the act saying that oil monies must be spent on national development priorities, especially those for a green state. But there seems to be no clear indication of how exactly the oil monies that are being spent are directly being spent towards those objectives. And indeed, I don't think that there's been enough of a discussion, or any discussion really, that I have observed regarding what exactly these development priorities are and what forum there has been to identify, discuss, and treat with these development priorities. So the act itself, whether it's being operationalized the way it should be, is very much in question. And I think it is something that should be questioned. I think it is something that will continue to come up. because ultimately, we need to have some safeguards as to how these monies are being spent. But of course, this assumes that we want good governance. And I think that, or at least it seems to me, that there isn't satisfactory evidence the PUP is interested in good governance. Now, of course, others may disagree with me on that point, but I don't see enough evidence to that effect whatsoever. So maybe
But,
we
but,
should
but
proceed from the assumption they don't want good governance.
right. But Elson, before we go to the break, and I asked the um, operator to queue up another clip from Henry um, uh, for our um, uh, perusal tonight. What is going on in the heads of leaders who are talking about democracy, yet giving away the country's money? What I want you to do is explain dissonance. Explain
Sure.
that dissonance.
Yeah, well, I think that it seems to me that much of the PvP seems to think that the oil money is their money. It's not the
There you go.
Guyanese oil money; it's their oil money. And so the PvP is operating as if they're free to do whatever it is they want. They have some imaginary mandate to do whatever it is they want. The Constitution stipulates otherwise, but I guess the Constitution is not particularly relevant to them when it comes to things like this. And so that's the way the PvP is operating. It's their money. They're going to do what they want with it. They're going to give away as much of it as they like. They're going to waste as much of it as they like. They're going to steal as much of it as they like. And no one can tell them otherwise. But I think that the Guyanese people who are punishing right now under these incredible cost of living increases surely must recognize that they're not getting their fair share. And of course, on the flip side of that, of course, MP Patterson touched on this. There's been talk about cash grants. We and in the PNC have spoken about salary top-ups, which is based off of economic literature that suggests that's generally the most recommended way to reduce poverty. In terms of a cash grant program, so you have a salary and you get an additional money on top of your salary to help you to reach a certain level so you can live livable income. So those are the things that are required, but those are all good governance things. And as I have indicated, I don't see any reason that we should assume that the PvP is interested in good governance. Rather, I think it is the opposite. So let us assume that all of this talk is talk in the context of not intending to govern well. And I think if you take that approach, it is very easy to understand how the PvP could see all money as their money. Guyanese is not really entitled to anything, and them as free to do whatever it is that they feel like doing.
And of course, their self serving definition of what democracy is. Democracy for them is about attacking an election um, in the face of evidence that was unearthed by the recount, which shows that the votes that were counted in the box got in there fraudulently. But democracy for them is not not about the method by which votes get in the box, but the very votes that are in the box. Democracy for them is about a narrow reading of elections. It's not about how you spend the people's money in their interests. Democracy for them is not about consultation. Democracy for them is not about all those who are affected by decisions must be at the table to make those decisions. We're going to take a short break, listen to our brother Henry for a couple of minutes, and when we come back, we will talk about the Natural Resource Fund in some more details.
I am a Guyanese. I am 216,000 square kilometers of forest, water, and land. I am six peoples with a history that in unity command the forest, water, and land. I am a total expression of strength. I'm all the trees in one, planted in the middle of Kurupukari. My roots spread from the Corentyne River east to the Iron River west, from the Akarai Mountains south to the Atlantic north. My branches are natural aviary of spontaneous colors, whistles, and songs. Oh, the kanji pheasant is my prize, the majestic macaw and her blood relative, the parrot, nature's phenomenon, birds with human tongue. Between my roots and my crown, I am robed in a collage of grains, colors, and many, many, many wood designs. I am Kabakali, I am Hobabali, I am Silver Bali, Green Heart, Purple Heart, Mora, Wallaba, and many more than you can find in just one tree. Yet, a whole world sleeps within the heart of me. I am a Guyanese. I'm a proud expression of the land that is my home. I'm a Guyanese. My arms are long, broad rivers that wash the face of the Caribbean Sea. Berbice, Abari, Mahaika Maikoni, Demerara Burasiri, Pomeroon Maruka, Takuta Amakura. There's scores of tributaries, my veins sketched artistically throughout the length and breadth of me. My history is written on each river's floor, history rich that's left to store with all the gold and diamonds my children find. My history, deep as the lakes that house my memory and my mind. The mighty Kaichor and her sister falls, Orange Hook, John Daniels, Bad Woman, Maipuri, Tagakaka, Chinakaruk, One to One know my history well. They sing it to the world, each and every one to tell. Land of many waters, that's what I'm called. Waters bursting with potentials, riches and all. I am a Guyanese. I'm a proud expression of the land that is my home. I am a Guyanese. I am made of the mud of 10 natural regions. My muscles are mountains bursting from beneath the earth. Imataka, Kanuku, Sierra Akarai, Pakaraima, Roraima. I am made of the jaspers, agates, quartz, amethyst, pearls, gold, diamonds, tons of precious and semi-precious stone. I am rice, vegetables and citrus, cattle, oil, bauxite, Guyanese, a human industry, a man, a woman, a child dedicated, each river to swim, each mountain to climb, each forest to explore, each resource to promote, a country to convert to El Dorado, a great dream. Yes, I am a Guyanese. I'm a proud expression of the land that is my home. I am a Guyanese.
Late Henry Rodney, who passed away today in Brooklyn, a true Guyanese. He epitomizes that poem that he recited there. Well, God rest in peace, my brother. For those of you who are not now joining us, Henry Rodney, our decorated, superlative man of the spoken word, the written word, really bringing us to our senses as the artist always does. Not spouting slogans about one Guyana, but weaving words and images together to bring to life the place that we call home, the place that we fight for every day, because what we are fighting for is not just to put a government in power or to remove a government from power, but it's fighting for the soul of our country, fighting for a birthright, fighting for a place that our children and grandchildren can inherit. They can smell the wood and they can hear the birds and they can feel the sunlight and the Atlantic breeze and know that we are Guyanese. Know that we are Guyanese. That's what we are fighting for more than ever. That's what we are fighting for more than ever. Sometimes we get caught up in the party politics and forget the human soul of our country. Those fools who come on programs like this and chatter nonsense in the chat, they are not real Guyanese. People for hire, fools for hire. Our taxpayers' money are paying them to come and chat a mouthful of filth on programs like these, interrupting our communion with ourselves and with our ancestors. We're not about fooling on these programs. We are about serious business. One day, in the not too distant future, when we would have broken the chains of the present imposition, you will say on a Thursday afternoon, on a Thursday evening, you were in the audience as Elson Low and David Patterson spoke about the dangers of selling our patrimony. Selling our patrimony to fill the pockets of a few. You would say that you were here and you were witnessing on the day that Henry Rodney transitioned to be with the ancestors again. You were here. You were here. Forget about the fools. I was told that as a boy that Mr. Burnham once was speaking in New Amsterdam. And as he was waxing lyrics, someone passed on a bicycle and jeered him. And in the middle of the sentence, he pivoted and said, and as fools like those will never understand. That's what we have to do. Fools like those here will never understand the seriousness of country, what a country means. It's not just about a flag and an anthem and a piece of land. It's about the existence of a people. It's about fulfilling the dreams of those who broke the shackles of enslavement and indentureship. They dreamed of a Guyana where our patrimony will serve to correct the wrongs of the Middle Passage and beyond. When we have a government that fails to do that, we have to do the work of our ancestors and the work of destiny. Destiny. Let us bring back our two guests and let's David, let's talk about the natural resource fund, because you did a thorough study of that fund and the ramifications. You even had some amendments that you wanted to put in that fund that I think has gotten lost in the noise bring us back to reality.
Right, David. So the Natural Resource Funds is a fund established by most oil producing countries. And what happens is that the proceeds that you get from oil, you put in this fund, because oil is a finite thing. So at some point in time, like the oil will run out. You wouldn't get as much as you are as you do. So when we were in government, we set up the fund to do primarily three things. First will be developmental, to develop the country, better roads, better light, better living conditions, better to bring the country from where we are at and to improve it. Secondly, the fund is what we call intergenerational, because we know, me and you and the other Guyanese, we are now benefiting from the oil, but the oil is a finite thing. When it runs out in 40 years, 30 years time, the next two generations, if we don't put it aside and preserve it and save it, they would not benefit from it, because obviously we spend all the money now, so it's like a saving. And thirdly, it's supposed to be like a stabilization fund, and the stabilization is like, as we have right now, when prices skyrocket, when the cost of living is out of control, as we have right now in Ghana and the rest of the world, you're supposed to take money from this fund and stabilize the price, ease the pressure on the citizens and those in that. So in 2019, we established a fund doing for these three purposes, knowing that it was all to do for Guyanese. We put an oversight committee in place, and the oversight committee had 22 persons on it, 22 Guyanese from different backgrounds, one from every region. So we have 10 regions, so every region, because would have had a representative. The indigenous people would have an additional representative from the Tuchel Council. The opposition would be there, the private sector, the banking association, and all these things. So this 22-person committee was an oversight committee. They were not the technical persons that do run it man day to day. What they would do is they would get a report, and they would say and look over it and say, well, yes, the money is being spent correctly or not being spent correctly, or say to the fund managers, just like it should be saying now, yo, cost living out of control, bread, flour out of control. Let us take $1 million and ease the pressure on the Guyanese. Buy down the costs, pay for the shipping or those things like that, so we could live. So what we wanted is, and our model was based on Norway. Norway, they have one of the best natural resources funds. It's over $1 trillion, 1-point-something trillion US dollars at the moment. So we set out that oil being Guyanese, all Guyanese must look at it. What the PPP did is, in December of last year, the beginning of December last, they brought a brand new bill, scrapped all the safeguard mechanisms that we had in place. All the in our bill, we had a limited amount that you could take out. Like if you have a savings account in a bank, you can't. This amount you can only take out a certain amount every year, so that ensure that you don't raid it. They scrapped all of that. And then what they did, they replaced the 22-person Guyanese oversight by a 5-person committee. And here's the laugh, and these are the people who oversight it. President Ali, he chooses 3 of them by his own deliberation. He doesn't have to consult anybody, he doesn't have to tell him. He could put his mom, his pop, and his 2 dogs on it. The 4th person is done by the parliament. Of course, they have the majority in the parliament. So they went to parliament and they passed and they appointed somebody. And then the 5th person is supposed to come from the private. It's coming from the private sector, but we all know where the private sector interests lie and where their allegiance always appeared to be. So in effect, we have 5 persons, 3 appointed by the president, 1 appointed by the PPP, and 1 is the private sector, who are the oversight committee. And obviously that doesn't augur well for it. What we did, we said, listen to us. We wanted to amend this. There must be a representative from the opposition. There must be a representative from the indigenous people. There must be a representative from the the Institute of Chartered Accountants, technical person, and so that the more persons can be in oversight this oil. Of course, the PPP never even wanted that. They bulldozed. They brought this big bill in December, like on December the 8th or the 9th of December, and on December the 29th, 8 working days they give us, because it's in between the Christmas period. 8 working days they give the opposition to review this, and they passed it using their majority. Of course, you probably know that we objected, and we objected strenuously. But what we have here now, and then they also put in a formula whereby they can take out up to 85% of the money. So imagine you have your savings account. What kind of savings account do you have? You could take out 85% of that money 85 to 90% every single year. So what is being left for our future generations will be tuppence, nothing at all. And what they do with the money, Barrett, and they like big projects. Skeldon, Marriott, the airport, the Berbice Bridge, and that's what they're doing. They and because those projects are easy, big money. Like the gas to shore project, $900 million. So therefore, they have this big ticket project, because it's easier. It's easier to steal money from a big ticket project than it is from a project that's done correctly. So they'll have a $900 million. They take $900 million out of our natural resources to build a gas to shore project, guaranteed. Just like Skeldon, which they took $200 million to build, it will be a white elephant, and they'll steal half of it. The Milo Falls, they brought back a Milo Falls project. You can remember that project for sure,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
They give a man who's a real estate agent or some sort of they gave him a contract to build a road. Never built a road, never even built a parapet, never even built a dirt strip. 16 million US dollars they awarded. They themselves had to cancel it when it reached over $45 million. And of course, it's a road in the jungle. So no one can really say how much is actually spent on the road. They brought that back. So when came in 2015, the road that they awarded for $50 million had cost over $45 million. So, but that's what they like. Because if they said they put 18,000 truckloads of whatever it is in there, there's nobody there to check it. And the money for that 18,000 truckloads of loom or laterite goes into somebody's pocket. So they like these big mega projects. So that when you cream the monies off, it's hard to check on those things like that. So they've taken out $607 million US. Here what they're doing, they want to build a Demerara Harbor Bridge. Very good. Everybody wants to have bridge, but they no studies. They just decided they put it anywhere they want. They want to go and build a mile again. That's a Ponzi scheme. I said that since 2013 when they first came. That is a Ponzi scheme. A mile, it goes dry every 4 months. 4 months out of the year, there's absolutely no water, but we're going to do it. They're going to build a gas to shore project when there's not enough gas to keep it going. They've put in about $4 billion to build new offices. They set out new office complex. So they put in money for that. They put in money for all sorts of this is the best one. They put in $2.4 billion in what they call infrastructure development, community enhancement projects. And what they want to do with this is like $50 million US. They said they're going to do is enhance communities. We already know that they under their government, Georgetown turned out to be a garbage city. It's returning there now. So what they're doing is they're allowing the garbage to pile up in Georgetown, and then they're going to take this $50 million US and say, and pay a few guys to come and clean and those things like that. Few natives. The guys desperate for work. They clean 2 drains and they said, yes, that is how that's what we've done. We enhanced it. So they're deliberately letting all our infrastructure fade, and then they're gonna take the money, repair it, give their friends and those things, and then get up and put nice billboards. They're good at flashy billboards and slogans. Promise kept. They haven't kept a single promise. I mean, they promised that they would create 50,000 jobs. Haven't done anything like that. They fired about 2,000 workers. But that's what they said. They said they're going to bring back the sugar estates. Anybody know, Elson will tell you, it's sugar as it once was in the glory days is dead. They've since the EU, the preferential treatment done, we read the last rights to it. They had post-mortems, they resuscitate that jumping, they bring it back, but they can't bring back sugar. But because they want to spend money and throw money after it, they're telling their supporters they're bringing back sugar. Then last year they blamed the rain. They couldn't bring back sugar, they couldn't open the factories, they blamed the rain. Then next thing you know, David, this is what they do. They said they will reopen back and more, but it's so little. And then they say to all the workers and more that sat down 2 years waiting for a job, oh, we will retrain you. We will retrain you and we're going to hire you. David, the oil and gas industry is a very, very technical industry. The sugar harvesters and those things like that, it's not as technical with that. You can't retrain entire communities, 1,000 persons, to go and do engineering and heavy engineering. The most you can get out of that is a few deckhands and those things like that. But they tell the people that, and they're going to sit down for another year, 2 years, and then they're going to blame the opposition. They'll come back and say, David Hines talk about it and scare away investors. David Patterson, Elson Low didn't support them, and the investors go. But we all know that we're in a really bad place at the moment. They have no vision. They got up and announced without anything, LBI will be an industrial estate. Why LBI? LBI, they just come up with these things, and you know that David, through your studies, everyone knows the study. These things have to be thought out, these things have to be planned, and those things like that, So they just get up. And here how we're operating. Cost of living is skyrocketed, not only in Guyana, so we're not blaming anything, but it's skyrocketed in Guyana. We who supposed to be the young little Dubai. Jagdeo goes up to Essequibo, and the people in the rice farmers are protesting. So they're not getting enough. The fisher folks are protesting. Everyone is protesting. And announce he's creating 8,000 new jobs, temporary jobs. So, and it's big fanfare and those things like that, and basically, and then what they're trying to do is like hire people, 800 people for 3 months. I don't know what they're going to do. But here's the flip side to it. Irfan comes on national TV and says, the reason why the contractors are doing a bad job in Guyana is because they don't have enough workers. So Jagdeo goes to Essequibo and the people complain they have no jobs. They go to Linden and complain they got no jobs. Irfan defending the poor construction workers, contractors saying that they can't find workers. It's obviously they can't find workers because they're looking in the wrong place. I want to tell Irfan or anybody, come in Lodge. I'm in Lodge. I could go out to this office right now and there are people there who are willing to sit down and get from work. But certain areas, they're not looking for workers. They're blaming it on something else, So the next people, they're going to get 800 jobs. But come in Lodge, come in our Boys Town, come in Sophia. They're willing and able to work if the contractors are so thing. Have a job expo in these areas. Go to Buxton, David. I'm sure you'll be able to find.
Oh Lord, Buxton, the villages on the East Coast. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to the whole East Coast,
Yeah.
But they don't. So they have sugar workers up in Berbice waiting to get a job. Every year they're going to give them $250,000 handouts. But they have people in the Lower East Coast, they have Buxton and Lodge and South and those things like that want to get a job, can get a job. not getting any handouts, and then they say that the reason why we're getting sloppy work is because they don't have any workers. But every Guyanese know that's not true.
Yeah, yeah. David Patterson, the former minister under the coalition government. We have in our audience another minister under the coalition government who had a lot to do with the Natural Resource Fund. Winston Jordan is in the audience. He's reminded us it's not the oversight committee, but the governing board. They're setting up there. And Winston also tells us that no one knows on what the resources will be spent because the funds are commingled with the funds in the consolidated fund. So
very good point you raised it here, because in 2019, it was very explicit that we had to, when you take the money out, you had to tell the Guyanese people and the public where you're spending the money. What they've done, they said, oh, there's one big consolidated fund, they're taking all the money and do there. When we asked specifically, where are you spending the $607 million that you have taken out of the fund? What are you doing with it? They said that it's one big fund and one big consolidated fund, and money is fungible. Lack of oversight. In every other country, when you could be able to identify what you're doing with the money from the Natural Resources Fund. That's another oversight here. Thanks, Winston.
And it's good to see Winston on here. Hope you're progressing very nicely with your recovery. And we miss you a lot on these programs. You brought to bear a lot of institutional knowledge on these programs, and we really miss you. Please, 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 please come back soon. I know that there are challenges, but we need your expertise and your institutional knowledge. One of the speakers is saying here, one of the viewers is saying here, we are talking. What we want is action. And, I sympathize with that view, except that talk is action. Talk is action. You believe God did not bless us with, the Jamaicans say, me mouth for me, and God did not bless us with intellect, not to use it. Intellectual discourse is action. If we don't talk, you all will say, we quiet, we not talking. We talk, and you say, we talk, we don't want action. David Rudder said, Caribbean man, yak. That's the root of our problem. Sometimes we have to think beyond what comes out of our mouth instinctively. Talk is action. The PPP does not want us to talk. That's why they've pushed us out of media. Think about it. If they don't want, if your detractors don't want you to do something, then it means they fear that thing. Bertolt Brecht, the revolutionary poet, asked, why do they fear the open word? Why do they fear the open word? Sometimes we give up our weapons to the enemy because we think that there is only one weapon we could fight with. Because we think that there is only one predictable way to fight. We have to understand that political struggle is a faceted engagement. And so we must not give up the weapon of discourse and dissemination of knowledge and information to the enemy. Talk off. Elson, we are running down on time. Anything you want to add to the Natural Resource Fund discourse?
Yes, absolutely. A couple of key points. One is that the youth and the University of Guyana representatives removed, women's representative removed. So when you're talking about intergenerational savings, it's hard to talk about that if young people are not even in the room. Another thing that I think is important to highlight is the discussions around having a sovereign wealth fund. We talked quite a bit about things like inflation. We talked about Dutch disease, and there is an economic committee, and an economic committee that's supposed to look at the economy's ability to absorb these funds, to actually deal with this huge influx, so that we don't lose competitiveness, we don't have runaway inflation, and so on and so forth. Now we've seen that the national budget, has exploded, being almost 50% larger than the previous year, about 4 to 5% larger than the previous year. We're already in a period of high inflation. If you explode the budget like that, don't you think that that will cause further inflation? The purpose of having an economic committee to look at that spending is to prevent these types of things. And so we're in for high prices over the course of the year because we've spent too much too quickly, in my opinion. I also think that the distribution of how we've spent funds has not been correct, with only 0.9% of the budget going towards cost of living mitigation measures, which is, I think, totally comical. Now, as far as and the MP Patterson mentioned things which are important, the gas to shore project they're spending money on. They're spending money on Amalia. What comes out a lot from the literature and from studies of oil and gas economies is that it is the intention, it is the purpose of these large infrastructure projects to engage in corruption and to engage in theft by governments. And so when we look at these types of projects by the government, we must ask ourselves, how are they going to be skimming money off the top here? And what is the method through which? Because we must be very much alarmed by this. There are countries in Africa where you see Equatorial Guinea is, I did a whole show on this, just to plug my show, The Lowdown, 7 to 8 p.m. on Saturday evenings on the coalition pages. But what I talked a bit about on that show is, in Equatorial Guinea, you'll see airports and schools and roads on islands that are uninhabited, because it is all an intention, is all a part of a scheme to skim money off the top. Amalia Falls, I believe, is an incredibly flawed project. On one of my shows, I think I dissected that project in maybe 13 different ways as to how it is a poor project and will cost Guyanese endless amounts of money, and also result in endless corruption, in my humble opinion. I think the government will, engage in a lot of corruption in that project. So I think that we must recognize that the safeguards are gone. The handbrakes are off. We're free to run wild. We're now subject to a lot of the risks that we were talking about when we first established this Natural Resources Fund. And something that I like to always point out to people is, Venezuela made an attempt at a sovereign wealth fund. They made an attempt, but there's a difference between a serious sovereign wealth fund and a paper sovereign wealth fund. And I do not believe that the government has put forward a serious sovereign wealth fund. It is transparent that that is not going to mitigate any of the dangers that the thing is designed to mitigate. And so I repeat, I believe that it is a monstrosity and that it is offensive to all Guyanese.
Thank you very much. And one of Politics 101ers, Selwyn Peters, is reminding us that our fixed date application on behalf of Christopher Jones and Norris Witter will put the brake on the NRF spending bonanza. I intend to take up next week and the following week the whole issue of the courts as an arena of the fight for social justice. Again, I know our supporters are a little bit frustrated because the courts have not been ruling in our favor. But again, we must not give up these arenas of struggle to the enemy. We have to fight on all fronts. If the court is not ruling our decision, we have to force the court. We have to go to the court. That's what they're there for, judicial review. Judicial review. We have to keep pounding and keep pounding. We are not a one-track people. If we were a one-track people, we will still be on the slave plantation. We have to fight on all fronts. Always remember that. My people, my people, my people, I'm saying to you all, cut this nonsense. Talk and talk, and you all want action. We have in action right now. We are more intelligent than saying those unintelligent things. Right? Credit ourselves with a long history of fighting. We know how to fight. We know how to fight. If we didn't know how to fight, we would not be here today. And we have to honor our ancestors by not shutting the nonsense. That's every time Jack Joe here we say, talk, talk, and no action, he's smiling. He say, we get them what we want them. Don't want them to sit down under the Puma tree and plan across Pharaoh to make a brilliant escape. You cannot make a brilliant escape if you don't use your God-given intelligence. David Patterson, closing thoughts.
Well, thank you for having me here, David. As you're right, there's a struggle one that we're part of, that we come from a long history of struggles, and in the end, we've always been successful. So you are absolutely correct, and the courts. It's not that the courts are necessarily ruling against us. I think what is even more frustrating is the slothfulness and and effecting the judgments that they give. And I give an example. I like to give your viewers example. The PP appointed 2 parliamentary secretaries, went to court, and that was ruled unconstitutional because the court ruled the 2 parliamentary secretaries. They've appealed that, but they're still paying the persons out of the money. They're still paying them, So if whenever you win, right? They appeal it, and the process just goes on. By the time by the time we get some final decisions, it'll be the next election will be up. So we're paying 2 parliamentary secretaries who get more money than MPs, who has all the benefits of an MP or a minister. They ruled that they were unconstitutional, and the PP appealed it. So that's the frustration you get with the courts. Not only that you feel the decisions aren't with you, when you do get a decision in your favor, the effectiveness of the judgment, enforcement of the judgment is lacking. So I do think that those are some of the issues that we want to do. But thanks for having me, and anytime, and you're welcome anytime after.
Thank you very much. Elson, your closing thoughts?
Hi, thank you for having me on. I think that this discussion has highlighted many areas of governance in the oil and gas industry that are severely lacking. I think we've talked about permits, we've talked about the evaluation process that took 3 days. That's some serious speed reading there, 1,000 pages. We've talked about the audits and the way that the country may be losing out hundreds of millions of US. We've talked about the Natural Resources Fund and how that one, in its current formation, does not act in any of the ways that it needs to act to protect the country from some of the big risks. One of those risks being high inflation, which we've seen really drive the cost of living up and make it difficult for Guyanese. We've talked about the fact that the government has not put enough money in that particular budget. All of it is, or it seems that about half of it is towards infrastructure, but only less than 1% towards cost of living, as much as Guyanese are in the most difficult cost of living circumstances in 10, maybe 15 years. So what we're seeing across the board here is poor governance by the PPP, whether through the PPP's incompetence or through intentional actions to try and foster their corruption. And that, I think, is why it's pretty concrete that Guyanese are in such a difficult position. We are going through an incredibly prosperous time, but for the average person, it does not feel like it is a prosperous time. As an alternative, the PNCR has put forward things like salary top-ups, changing the tax threshold, easing this pain for now and for the future, so that we can have a more equitable society going forward. And of course, good governance is something that we believe in and that we've established with international organizations. We can and we will engage in good governance. But
Thank you.
and I go back to my final point, which is the PPP has demonstrated they have no interest in good governance. So let us assume that that is what it is.
And if that was what it is, we either make them engage in good governance or we get them out of there. As old people say, get the hell out of here.
I prefer the latter.
Me too. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for coming on. And as usual, enriching Politics 101 as a vehicle of knowledge, information, mobilization, and action. Action. It's not talk or action. Talk and action. Talk with action. Action with thought. And we shall prevail. And for you, the audience, yes, you are loyal. You are loyal. Marla, Joan, McDonald, Yvonne McPherson, Philbert Taylor, Michael Reed, Donna Liverpool, always with us, all the way out there in the United Kingdom, Yvonne McPherson, Dansford Jeffrey, Persis Wilson. Oh, that's such a lovely name. I thought it was Paris, but it's Persis Wilson. Creativity in name. Donna, Ian Williams, Troy Boyce, Lester Beckles, Donna Liverpool, Donna is all over us. Nelson, Joy, Fitzroy, Marcus, I think I know that name, Lennox Springer, Rosamund McLeod. All of you, Gloria Pod, F4 Armstrong, I think that's my country girl from Boston, Company Front Brethren Church. All of you, wonderful people, Glenford Gordon, wonderful Politics 101 people. I love you, we love you, because you love us and we all love Guyana. Let's keep in our prayers the family of Henry Rodney, our fallen soldier. We go out with his voice.
Women club. Women, you supposed to know that. And let me tell you why. Why? Women, you're powerful. The amount of stupidness y'all just get women to do is a love. The amount of let me tell you, but what I just get vexed with y'all is that spot that we love, that we relish. You see that? You're jumping the gun. That thing is powerful. Men, we need to admonish the power of the fluff. I just get vexed when you hear these women name this thing that does lick men upside down, this thing that does make men run crazy, this thing that does make men commit suicide, this thing that does make man kill him at it. Murder. That's the power of the fluff. But y'all just name it. And I'm telling you tonight, stop that stupidness. All them nasty, stupid, ugly names that you're naming this thing. It make the thing losing its sucrose content. What the hell is patter cake? Come, Susie, come, Jenny, come wash your patter cake. Come wash your flossy. your punky, your pinky, your namins, your saltfish, your pussy, your porky, your cat, your sugar ball. All them names that you give the damn thing. The thing becomes schizophrenic. It doesn't know which name to respond to. Ladies, stop this stupidness. The right name for this thing is fluff. Hear me? Fluff.